So, what does it really take to be saved? I mean, when you strip away all the traditions, all the culture, all the noise, what's the bare bones, rock bottom reality of reviving a soul from death? We're going to dive into this because the answer, well, it might just be simpler and way more profound than you think. But to get there, we have to start in a place of pure chaos. Just picture it, a hospital trauma bay. It's a complete maelstrom. Fluorescent lights are glaring off steel instruments, and the air is thick with that smell, blood and antiseptic. And right in the middle of it all, a life is just hemorrhaging, fading out. The team is a blur of motion, pushing fluids, hanging blood, just fighting with everything they have. And then, that sound. The monitor flatlines. Asystole. That long, awful monotone that means clinical death. People are shouting, "Get the adrenaline! Get the paddles!" You see the body arch as the electricity hits, but the rhythm just fades away again.
And now, it's just raw desperation. Chest compressions, direct cardiac massage, it's an all-out war for just one life. But this whole intense scene, it's more than just a medical emergency.
Our source material uses this as this powerful metaphor for what salvation is all about. The fight for a person's soul can be just as messy, just as urgent as that scene right there in the trauma bay. It's about a life that is failing, that's giving up.
Scripture itself paints this exact picture. This verse from Ephesians, it's describing a state of spiritual death, a flat line of the soul. And really, the story should end right there. But then you get two of the most powerful words in the entire Bible. But God. God, who is rich in mercy, steps right into that trauma bay and chooses to resuscitate. So, if God is the one doing all the work, why do so many people feel so incredibly insecure about their faith?
Okay, so let's get into the diagnosis. The problem, as our source argues, is that sometimes the very culture we build around faith can actually become the source of the sickness. Christian culture itself can lead to this profound, gnawing lack of assurance. And a major symptom of this is a condition called scrupulosity. It's a kind of religious perfectionism, and it creates this impossible trap where you feel like you have to earn your salvation, but you're constantly haunted by the feeling that you can never, ever do enough. You just can't measure up. And research actually breaks this down into two different sides. On one hand, you've got zealous religious dedication, that's just striving for high standards. But the other one, that's religious self-criticism. And here's the kicker. That's the one, the harsh, legalistic, self-judging one, that's directly linked to burnout, anxiety, and that constant nagging feeling that you're not saved.
So where does all this come from? Well, our source points right back to the culture itself. Verses that are meant to be encouraging, like "examine yourselves," can get twisted into a voice of criticism. You have these centuries-old theological arguments, Calvinism versus Arminianism, that can leave regular people just feeling caught in the crossfire. And when faith becomes this abstract thing that's all about the future, it can feel totally disconnected from your life right now.
So, what's the actual cure for this? The core argument of our source material suggests a pretty radical refocus. It says that genuine, solid assurance comes when we bypass all those cultural systems and get back to the two fundamental ways God actually reveals himself. Okay, let's break these down. It's pretty simple, really. On one side, you've got general revelation, what we can all see and reason about the world around us. And on the other, you've got special revelation, which is God's direct, personal communication to us.
General revelation is basically the starting point. It's the knowledge of a creator that's available to literally everyone, just by opening your eyes and looking at the universe. From the mind-boggling precision of the cosmos to our own gut feeling about right and wrong, creation itself is screaming that there's a designer. Like the book of Romans says, the evidence is so clear that humanity is without excuse. This tells us that there is a God.
But just knowing that there's a God can feel, a bit incomplete, right? And that's exactly where special revelation comes in. If general revelation tells us that a God exists, special revelation tells us who that God is. It's God revealing himself directly, through Scripture, absolutely, but also through things like dreams, visions, and deeply personal encounters that give us the clarity and framework for our faith. Okay, so now for the evidence. This is where it gets really compelling. The source argues that God actively uses these forms of revelation to go out and search for people, especially those who are way outside the reach of traditional Christian culture.
Check out the data on this slide. It's fascinating. A 2017 study looked at Muslim converts to Christianity. Over a third of them, 37%, were driven by mystical or affectional experiences, personal, supernatural encounters.
But look at that last bar, 0%. Nobody was driven by coercion. This just perfectly shows that God's direct intervention is a real, powerful force for conversion, and it has nothing to do with human pressure.
And we're not just talking about numbers here. Listen to this story from the source material about a Muslim convert. She talked about having a recurring vision of Jesus just offering her comfort and peace. And for her, this wasn't just some dream. She called it a manifestation of divine hope breaking into her life. That right there is special revelation in action.
Here's another one. A person felt a physical touch and heard a voice say, "Do not be afraid, I am here for you." They knew, without a doubt, that this was a direct encounter. The assurance didn't come from a book or a sermon. It came because God Himself took the initiative to reach out.
Theologically, this whole idea is baked right into Jesus' own stories. I mean, think about the parable of the lost coin. Our source points out that the woman probably spent more on lamp oil to search for the coin than the coin itself was actually worth. So what's the point? God's search for us isn't based on logic or some kind of cost-benefit analysis. It's this reckless, extravagant love that says just one lost soul is worth any and every risk.
All right, let's start putting all these pieces together for the recovery. How do we get from that fragile faith of cultural performance to the rock-solid assurance of just being found? This table just lays out the whole conflict perfectly. On one side, you've got a faith based on Christian culture. Where does it come from? Human performance. What's driving it? That nagging question, did I do enough? And what's the result? A fragile, conditional, fear-based faith. But then look at the other side. Faith based on divine revelation. Where does it come from? God's initiative. What's the driver? A simple, powerful statement, Christ found me. And the result? A secure, unconditional, love-based assurance. It's night and day.
So when you look at it this way, it's pretty clear why a faith built only on culture is doomed to fail. It replaces a real, living encounter with God with a checklist of things to do. It creates that awful legalistic scrupulosity we talked about. It feels abstract and totally disconnected from your actual life. But maybe worst of all, it frames assurance as something you have to achieve, instead of a gift you simply receive from the God who is actively searching for you.
And that really just leaves us with one final, vital question to think about. When you look at your own life, your own spiritual journey, is your faith built on the exhausting treadmill of performing for God, or is it built on the profound, life-altering, freeing assurance of being found by Him?